Hello and welcome to Open Minds UFO Radio. I'm your host Alejandro Rojas, and I am here with Martin All Wet Willis.
Yes, and freezing, don't forget.
Wet and freezing, which is bad. This isn't like you're having a wet T-shirt, a one-man wet T-shirt contest over there, which
no,
probably
but I'd lose. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say a lot of people were probably thinking, "Wow, ooh, that's enticing," but no, this was not scheduled, no audience, and I guess some roof leaking that has not been good, huh?
Yeah, pipes broke. We had a cold snap here. It got way below zero. I think like 5 or 7 degrees below zero, and then the next day it was 40-something degrees, and I walked into my guest house, and it was pouring from the ceiling down to the floor. Everything's ruined. It's a mess.
That's the other benefit of living somewhere where there isn't snow, is that, all of these there's so many different things that you have to deal with when you're dealing with snow. Frozen pipes and breaking pipes, especially when people go on vacation. They will be doing, so be careful, be sure to, I remember, from Colorado, be sure to have one of your faucets dripping, there's water movement, so it doesn't freeze, all that stuff.
I have to actually hire someone when I'm coming out there to the UFO Congress. I'm going to have to hire someone to watch my house.
Really? Oh, my
God. The only way I can do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy
it's very
moly.
Needy. It's a very needy house.
Yeah, it's a needy house. Wow. Yeah, so I hope you get that resolved. I'm sorry for your troubles there.
Yeah, I got insurance.
Yeah, that's good. Well, my guest for the day is Paul Dean yet again. We've seen and heard quite a bit from him on our different Open Minds specials and interviews and things like that. But that's just because he's doing some great stuff. And, last time we talked, and we've talked with others about how NORAD definitely had to have had some UFO files. However, they've continued to deny that they have these files. Well, Paul has found some files that show that, yes, indeed, they have some UFO files. So, unfortunately, it's another example of NORAD lying. So we're going to be talking about, another example of another government organization lying about UFOs. So we'll talk to Paul about that. We're also going to get more insight in where is he getting these files, how come, others haven't seen them? And I think it's very telling why these researchers, haven't, a lot of them come forward, or at least, been more flamboyant, if that's the best word, about getting their information out there. And so it's a great discussion. He's in Australia, and unfortunately, I always have a bit of problem talking with him. So the sound quality is a little not as great as, like you and I talking right now, where it sounds like we're in the room. Even when you talk to people in the UK, it's really good. So unfortunately, I've had a bit of issue, but still, it's a great talk, so I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, Australia has something like 3 megabytes per second for one of their that's their high-speed internet. And
really?
Yeah, they really do have issues. I had my guest last week, the week before that was from Australia. There's always issues, but they are planning on, they're at least talking about redoing their system down there. But I think we don't rate as the highest and best internet, but other countries, like you just mentioned, seem to have their game, when it comes to this.
Right. So it's going to be a good talk. I mentioned a little bit of this last night. Did you even know this? Actually, early this morning, about 12 hours ago, I was on Coast to Coast with George Knapp.
Oh no, I haven't heard that yet. Yeah, I'll listen to it. Great.
Yeah, so about my time, it's 2 p.m. here now, but this was at 2 a.m. my time. It was 1 to 3 a.m. But it was a lot of fun. It was a year in review, but we did get to some of this stuff Paul Dean talks about And he was like, wow, I need to talk to this guy. And he does. That would be a great show if George Knapp had him on. And it's always a great honor to talk to George because he's just one of my heroes. And, we even mentioned some of these news items. The big ones for the year had to do with him and his work.
Mm-hmm.
So really fun stuff. So check that out on Coast to Coast. You can go. Some of you probably already subscribed to their archives. But and then sometimes the shows pop up on YouTube.
They do a lot, yeah.
I think they always do, actually.
Yeah, under Conflict, Coast to Coast AM Conflict.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Every day. Taken down a lot, but yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know that we should share that. Do you think we should?
No, I think I'm really sorry. You probably ought to edit that out.
Yeah, because we don't want to be going to jail.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. You have to actually listen and edit. But sorry about that.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Wow.
I would edit it all out. Seeing it on YouTube, the whole thing, maybe.
Yeah, edit out YouTube.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I'm not going to edit any of this.
I'll kill you.
I'm not going to. Oh, no. That'll be my Christmas treat to you.
Thank you.
But yeah, so don't go do that. Go subscribe and listen that way. So, but speaking of Christmas, I wanted to share with you, because I don't know that it's been laid out, and maybe it has, and you can tell me if it has, but the ufology Christmas story. Because, there's a lot of mythologies when it comes to UFOs. Ancient Aliens kind of explains a lot of stuff in their own way and what they believe may have happened in the past. And, there's this string. You always hear people talk about it in the UFO world. So I'm just going to kind of tell the story. And it would be nice if we had some kind of music, but I don't, prepared that's Christmassy about, the night of Christmas. So you want to hear it?
I do. Do you want me to hum the Christmas song or something in the background?
Well, nah, that's okay. I guess if you really
heard me sing.
You really feel the move to do so, you can try that. But that I may edit out.
Okay.
So this is a story, and you've probably heard this idea, and I think unfortunately, maybe even my girlfriend subscribes to this story, which is, and we tease her about it, but the whole idea that what happened, years ago, many, 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 many years ago, 2000 or whatever years ago, on Christmas Eve, the night of Christmas Eve into Christmas morning, was that, Mary and Joseph she's pregnant, but she doesn't know how, so she was like abducted and impregnated. And so that must have happened, I'm assuming, who knows how long a hybrid alien needs to take to be born, but whatever night that it was conceived, then she was ready to have the baby. So they look and the aliens, of course, were interested in their hybrid baby, so they had a UFO following Mary and Joseph. And that's so as they were looking for somewhere to have the baby, and the story of where they eventually found this barn and everything. And there were ufologists at that time. They're really, because there's always been people interested in paranormal and all kind of weird things going around. And so it was these three ufologists who were skywatching and looking for UFOs when they saw this UFO. And they were like, we need to go follow and see what's going on. What's this UFO doing? And these were, what have become the three wise men. But this is what my theory here is that actually their names were Frank, Murray, and the other one was a blonde guy, so his nickname was Goldie.
There was no Stanton?
No. Oh, okay. Stanton, I know Stanton's up there in age, but he was not born yet 2,000 years ago that I'm aware of. He could be some sort of immortal hybrid himself, but we'll ask him at the Congress. He'll be there at the UFO Congress. I just spoke to him the other day. He's such a fun person to talk to. But anyway,
He really is. Yeah.
he was not there. So of course these guys show up because they follow the UFO and they're like, wow, we're gonna get to watch this hybrid alien baby being born. And of course that hybrid alien baby was Jesus Christ.
How about that?
I'm sure you've heard people hypothesize about Jesus being an alien.
Well, I've heard a lot of Bible's alien story things, but yeah.
So that's a new story of Christmas, and as people get into this story will become more predominant. And I figured I would lay it down first. Maybe we can even get credit for, being the first ones to kind of
break the news.
Yeah,
Wow.
And so do you get it with the Frank and the Murray? They're later on they're thinking about telling the story, and we're like, we can't tell people these guys were named Frank and Murray and some dorky, UFO researcher. So let's say they were wise men, and they were dressed up like kings, because for some reason they're dressed up like kings and the fables and on the nativities and stuff, and instead of Frank, Murray, and Goldie, they brought the gifts of frankincense, because that sounds fancier, and myrrh, and wasn't gold the third one, or do I have that mixed up?
Yeah, I'm not up on that story, so
yeah. There you go. What do you think?
Yeah. I'm just beside myself.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's affected you that strongly, huh?
Yeah. This thing has legs. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Maybe thousands of years. In 1,000 years, this could be the story. The nativity will be like this, Above, they'll have like a hovering UFO or a hologram UFO floating above the nativity. And, it's going to be, the future is going to be fascinating.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
There we go. You heard it here first, people.
All right.
Yep. You can sit back. I remember in 2016, in 80 years, people are really young now. The youngest people who may be listening, telling their grandkids about, I remember, we used to not have this UFO over our nativities like you kids do now.
Yeah. Wow. Changing the world, man.
Changing the world. But before we move on, that's just some stuff for our Christmas special. That was just a Christmas treat for the listeners there. But I guess unless you have a Christmas special treat, maybe we should move on to the UFO news.
Yeah, I came without one, empty-handed, so let's do the news.
Okay, yeah. Let's go for it. Unless you really want to sing, and if you're dying to sing.
No, you don't want to hear that, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's your treat to us then, is not singing.
That's right.
Well, thank you.
All right, well, I'm going to start the news. And this one is fun because of the title right off the bat. Roswell UFO drops in front of witness vehicle. Now, this happened back in October, on October 24th of this year. A New Mexico witness at Roswell reported a late-night encounter with a silent triangle-shaped UFO just 20 feet ahead. And the thing actually, whatever it was, hovered over their truck as well. And it was reported by a female witness, and it's case number 80348. And this was posted by Roger Marsh a couple of days ago.
When was that sighting again?
It was October 24th
of
this year.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, she basically said after eating and well after sunset, we headed back on the main road out of town, and stopping at a red light behind a couple of cars in our truck with vehicles all around us, we both noticed and said out loud that the object was coming straight toward us from the dark sky. And the two had recently seen other lights, but in the weeks prior, she said we had seen other lights in the sky around Albuquerque and thought that this was going to be the same, but nope. In comparison, this object was, this one was huge in comparison to the faraway sightings they had before, and they didn't have time, or she didn't even think to take out the camera, and I totally understand that. That is exactly, everyone wants to see what's going on, and the camera a lot of times is the last thing on your mind. The object had lights on all ends. The front or back, she doesn't know which is which, was more triangular with bright white lights. The back or front, again, which was closest to us, was more rounded, but still triangular, and it had bright red, green, and blue light shining down. It was larger than our truck, appeared to be solid and a solid object, and appeared out of nowhere, coming straight toward us. So when it went over the truck, she peeked out the back window to see if she could see it like go away, and because they had to move away from the light had turned green, so they started moving. And so she turned around and looked, and there was nothing there, which is kind of bizarre. So she also said that she felt, this is another quote, I felt numb, like, did that just really happen? And where did the thing go? And in the moment, she just wondered what was going on, and she thought that her husband's account was just very much like hers. The whole thing happened in about 5 to 7 seconds. And so this was investigated by the MUFON State Director, Donald Burleson, and he closed the case as an unknown. Interesting, though, huh? Right in Roswell.
It is interesting. Yeah, another Roswell sighting. Interesting enough, too. Well, it'll be what, the 50th, 70th anniversary?
That's
60, right. 70 this summer. So I'll be there speaking and stuff. But the newspaper's doing more UFO stuff. I guess they're starting a UFO podcast. The Roswell newspaper out there, and it's the old Roswell Daily Record, the one that was famous for having the front page about the UFOs and stuff. So that is exciting. People always get excited when something happens in Roswell.
Now, the actual event happened in 1947, about 60 miles, wasn't it? Something like that. But there's so much open land out there and hard to get to. But it was. I know you've been to the site, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have been to the site, and it's really cool. But you're right. It is out of town. But you know, they call it the Roswell incident.
Yeah. Well, so Roswell's the nearest big town to where the incident actually happened.
Essentially, yeah. Yeah, and it's in the middle of nowhere.
Right, yeah.
It's about 2 hours from Albuquerque. So, but now this is great. They have flights that fly into Roswell. So that's cool.
Really? Wow.
So last year I got to fly in, didn't have to make that huge long drive, and so that's really nice.
Yeah, wow. How about that?
So this is kind of cool because there was another, and this is a Christmas triangle UFO story, which is always nice. In Reno, on December 2nd, there was also a triangle UFO seen. It was 6:50 p.m., and this was on December 2nd. It's a Christmas story because the family was unloading a Christmas tree when they spotted it. This guy says he was unloading when his son looked up and said, "Hey, guys, what's that?" So he and his son and his daughter looked up, and they saw this slow-moving craft. I mean, that they felt was triangular in shape. Now, often, airplanes at night are mistaken for a triangular craft because the lights are in a triangular formation often. Mm-hmm. However, these guys feel that they saw the blackness of the craft and the edges of it. They felt it was only 100 or 300 feet high, and it moved kind of slowly and steadily in a particular direction. They even said it looked like the Phoenix Lights in Arizona, so they were familiar with that sighting. This one was also closed as an unknown. It was investigated by the Nevada MUFON Assistant State Director, Sandra Countess. So another triangular UFO.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not too many of the old-fashioned discs,
Well, yeah, not many of the discs, and again, like we always talk about, the triangular sightings seem to be the lowest and the most exciting. Some guy called in on Coast to Coast last night, and he recounted his own triangle UFO sighting. So I don't know. Maybe the triangles are going to come home for Christmas.
It could be.
Could
Wow.
be. That would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Any more UFO news, my friend?
No, but I see that you have a nice, really great posting up on Open Minds, and that's the UFO photographs. It's actually one photograph of airborne sighting, Tucson to Mexico City, and this happened back in 1965.
Yeah,
And what an image that is.
Yeah, talk about the large metallic discs. That's what this was. It was seen in 1965 August by an American businessman who was on a passenger flight from Mexico City to Tucson, and he spotted this large object. Now, of course, what's great about these sightings that we post on these videos that our video guy Michael Klein puts together, these are from our archives. We've gotten these from a gentleman who was in the Air Force for years and collected UFO information for decades, and essentially all of the best photographs he would try to get copies of and then find out the story. Some were sent to him as well, but he would try to figure out, what was it that people saw or were claiming. And some of these photographs are just spectacular. They're so strange and interesting, and this is one of them. So, and what's interesting on these photos is they seem so credible, the witnesses, and the photos I think are more significant in that, this is before Photoshop. So, yeah, this is another great video. We have this up for free on YouTube. What is also fun on these videos is we embed them as videos on Facebook and Twitter. So if you're a tweeter, it's fun to get videos that you can play right there on your Twitter. And then in Facebook, you can play them right there in your Facebook. I remember YouTube used to play right in the Facebook post, but it doesn't anymore. You got to click the link and it takes you to YouTube. So there's multiple ways we allow people to be able to see them so they can get this information and share in the excitement of these old photos. And many of these old photos have disc-shaped craft. That like we talked about, how that seemed to be more predominant back in the day. So,
right.
Who knows what the heck, huh?
What the heck? The new models are triangular, I guess.
Yeah. The new craft.
So you can tweet this off to Trump if you wanted to. See what he has to say about it.
I could, but I don't know if I'd want to. He seems to get upset often. And I don't want to be the focus of any ire.
I know. He might nuke the aliens. You never know. Yeah,
that is true. Always a danger, too. And I don't think we should necessarily show any aggression towards them.
I don't think so.
At this point.
Right.
Let's get some more information first. Speaking of which, because it's going to be a couple of weeks till we talk again, and the holidays are always big for movies. There's a couple movies along this vein. Arrival. Did you say you saw that yet?
I did. It was great.
Yeah,
really
it's
good movie.
Great. And it's about this topic. What do we do if we we find some aliens or something? And it's a real thoughtful kind of program. And then I haven't seen yet the new Star Wars, which is, of course, about fighting aliens to the death. And, but that also I'm getting good reviews on, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I'm going to see it Wednesday with my son.
Cool.
And by the way, my son's not into UFOs at all, but he watched Arrival with me, and it had him thinking for 3 or 4 days. He would, call me or write me a comment that he got out of the movie. It's really a great movie. I highly recommend it.
I agree. I think it's great. And then I get to go watch Passengers tonight, which is exciting. So I think I've mentioned it. The Passengers movie, I was able to speak with the set designer and the editor, who also edited some Star Trek and Star Wars movies, and interview them and post those on Huffington Post. And so they're letting me go to a special press screener tonight. So I'm going to get an early preview of that movie. That one doesn't have aliens. As far as I know, it may have a trick ending or something like that. But
this is the one where they're in suspended animation, and then they wake up They wake up early.
Two people
I
wake
gotta
up
see that.
early. Yeah, that looks great. So it looks like a really good movie. I'm really excited about it. And the people I interviewed were so nice, and it was so fun talking to them. So you can go find those on my Facebook posts of those, or Google me on and put Alejandro Rojas Huffington Post, and you'll find all my Huffington Post posts there too. I would, please do read them, because these guys were fun to talk to, and they had some interesting insight, and the movie looks wonderful.
Yes, yeah, I'm gonna watch that one for sure.
Yeah, so next time we talk, which probably won't be for a couple of weeks, I'll let you know how the movie was.
Excellent, sounds good.
All righty. So if that's it for news,
that's it.
Then you have a wonderful Christmas, my friend. And don't forget to share the Christmas story with your family around the table, or around the fire. And and I'm sure they're, especially your son, it sounds like, will appreciate that.
I think so. And my robot wants to say something to you.
Oh, well, your robot, okay.
Alejandro and listeners. Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas, Alejandro and listeners. Ho,
yeah, I heard it.
Merry Christmas, Alejandro and listeners.
Jeez. Anyway, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah, I didn't know you had a robot. That's really neat.
Oh, yeah. But
you'll have to invite her on the show. We can ask her about UFOs.
Yeah, she's got quite an English accent. Falling in love, yeah.
Oh, geez, yep.
Oh,
well.
Well,
all right, on that note, let's go ahead and talk to Paul Dean. I am very happy to welcome back to the show our friend in Australia, Paul Dean. Hello.
Hi, how's it going, Alejandro?
Doing very well. Very excited to talk to you again. And some of your recent research has been making some buzz online. And it's kind of perfect because, just to catch people up, last time we talked about on the podcast and on our UFO magazine about the Air Force reporting of UFOs and how they used the service system, and then they have used OPREP 3 reporting, just these different reporting. But that, NORAD, including to you, has denied having UFO files.
Yeah, and it just doesn't stop with service reporting and OPREP 3 reporting from the 70s and 80s and so on. It is really extraordinary what they've said in public. I'll sort of lay it out. Since the 40s, okay, so we think, we believe, we see that UFO activity has occurred over, mainland United States, all over the world, whatever. And if you look back through the history of Project Blue Book, which was based within a research and development, United States Air Force, or Air Defense Command, United States Air Force at different times, the one agency, one main agency and another one that comes in a close second, that you would think would know, would have dealt massively with the UFO matter, was the North American Defense Command, NORAD. It's been variously based at Ent Air Force Base, Colorado, Peterson Air Force Base, Colorado, with an operations center at Cheyenne Mountain for a long time. They're responsible for airspace management, air sovereignty issues, air defense across the whole North American continent. In fact, their current fact sheet says that NORAD is, quote, charged with the missions of aerospace warning and aerospace control for North America. Aerospace warning includes the detection, validation and warning of attack against North America by aircraft, missiles, blah, blah, blah. Aerospace control includes air sovereignty and air defense of the airspace of Canada and the United States of America. NORAD, now the other one that comes in a close second, the old Aerospace Defense Command, ADCOM, they were also based at Peterson and Air Force. Now, between these two huge agencies that are mainly run by the United States Air Force, but also directly answerable to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Staff, the Chairman of the Joint Staff, and so on, you would think that they would be the premier, prime, all-knowing entities that really would have a handle in the UFO matter. But through the 40s, 50s, 60s, although they didn't exist in the 40s, Air Defense Command did, but right up until the end of Project Blue Book, they were very mysteriously silent. Service reports, which is communication instructions for reporting of vital intelligence sightings, did get their premier distribution list. So if a pilot reported a UFO via the service system while in flight, the actual UFO report, like his words, like time, date, where he was, description of the object and so on, would go through the nearest air traffic or air defense command and control center, and then onto the the office of the commander-in-chief of NORAD. So we do see through history, we do see NORAD at least receiving information, receiving UFO reports, being CC'd into new policy, etc. But oddly, nothing was coming out. All through the 60s, 50s, 70s, whatever, nothing was coming out. And when the United States Air Force and the Department of Defense, through a 17th of September announcement by Dr. Robert Siemens, who was, I think, Secretary of the Air Force at the time, when he said that the United States government is not going to be collating or collecting UFO reports anymore, that there's no reports, no UFO activity has ever affected national security. There is no place in the United States government to deal with this, even within the military. UFOs are myth and fantasy, whatever else. It appears that NORAD were not part of that theory. That NORAD continued to, we always knew that they were up to their eyeballs in UFO stuff. We just couldn't prove it. Now, it turns out that we were right, and now we've got the documents. We've had a lot of the documents for a long time, but some are completely new. Some have never been seen. Some I've actually obtained personally, and some have been obtained in the 70s and 80s by researchers, but just never really shared with the UFO community because a lot of people just aren't interested. It's very technical, this stuff. So I'll give you some examples of what NORAD has told the public over the years. Now, there was a researcher in Philadelphia called Robert Todd, and he made a general inquiry to NORAD's Directorate of Administration in November 1975. And on the 10th of November, Colonel Terence C. James, who was director of the Directorate of Administration within NORAD, came back to Robert Todd with a letter, and it was quite long, but it said, one key point is this command has no present activity in investigating UFOs, nor does any area of the United States government that I'm aware of. Now, another letter also to Robert Todd said, we do not undertake investigative measures. Our interests are satisfied in near real time, and no formal documentation is created by this command. 10 years later, in 1988, researcher Armand Victorian actually wrote to the chief of the operations branch in the public affairs area at NORAD about UFOs, and they came back to him and they said, thank you for your recent letter requesting information on unidentified flying objects. Unfortunately, we have not recently released any information concerning UFOs, nor do we keep any information on file. Although we do not have any information on UFOs, you may wish to write to the following address, and they should be of assistance to you. And they actually gave him MUFON's address, the organisation in America, which is just extraordinary because, Armand Victorian was writing to NORAD to ask him about air defence matters, unknown aircraft, UFOs, and they're fobbing him off to a civilian network. Like we've seen this in Australia actually a bit too. The problem is with all this is that this is all deceitful. I mean, each of these public statements are just entirely deceitful. Aside from the fact that service reporting, and as I've said, service reports end up, the final basket of where they end up is the Office of the Commander-in-Chief of the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD.
I have a little trivia around the service also that we discovered. Sorry to interrupt your train of thought, but this is just kind of interesting. I think you'll find it interesting. We've been talking about service. I have been for a long time, and so have you. Been looking at those. This is really weird. When we're writing that piece that you are in, where we interview you, the video, our video guy discovered a document that had the pronunciations of some of these different acronyms, and they actually suggests it's Cervise, is how you say it.
Oh,
Isn't
really?
that weird?
I've never heard that.
Yeah, neither had I.
Okay.
I was so
No,
shocked. See, I thought
I've
you would
never
like
heard
that little piece of trivia.
I've definitely never heard that, Cervise.
I'll send that
no,
to you.
never heard that. I think, no, I haven't heard that. That would be for use, because what happens, the pilot will say service, or apparently service, and then all the nearest air defence command centres then get their pen and paper out ready for his report.
Wow.
Anyway, so, Robert Todd and Barry Greenwood and various other researchers in the 70s started pummeling NORAD with, now back then NORAD were actually, because now NORAD will not answer FOI requests. They will acknowledge that you sent them, but they don't have to actually furnish you with anything. It's not like, all your other government departments at all.
Mm-hmm.
NORAD are really unusual. Anyway, so researchers in the 70s started pelting NORAD with general correspondence, which is just letters, as well as freedom of information requests. And what was really interesting was, as the years went on, it became apparent that NORAD had all these what were instructions and regulations and manuals actually did deal with UFOs, and it actually says that in the title. It's extraordinary.
Okay. All right. So we had some issues with the Skype, but we've got Paul back on the telephone. And so where you left off was that NORAD had some documents that showed that they were essentially looking at the UFO or research, looking at UFOs, and you said it was even in the title of some of the documents.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up a couple of in front of me. The extraordinary thing was that when Robert Todd particularly started hitting NORAD and ADCOM with requests, what he would do, he was very smart. What he would do, so all military commands have certain types of documents. They're called doctrine, and they can be instructions, regulations, manuals, directives, pamphlets, guidelines, right down to even things like maps, charts, menus at mess hall-based food areas, everything. And what was odd was that Robert Todd started FOIing both NORAD headquarters and ADCOM headquarters, and also the NORAD regions and the ADCOM regions. He was saying he would FOI all of them in say 1974, 75. I've got all his letters, and asked for all copies, like an index or a list of all the doctrine held at that particular NORAD region or at that particular headquarters centre. And they'd come back to him, and even the list, even it's called an index of publications, even the index of publications was considered a regulation. It was a regulation to keep this list current and so on. And what Robert Todd would do is he would go through all these lists, and he would look down to see what was appropriate. And I'm just finding some of the I'm just finding some of the things that he found even early on. Hold on. Okay, so he would get all these lists, and then what he would do, he would ask NORAD to then provide him a copy of that list under the FOI, Freedom of Information Act. So, say 20th NORAD region or Alaska NORAD region or NORAD headquarters or the equivalent ADCOM areas would send him these lists of instructions and manuals and regulations. He'd go down them, and he'd say, well, I like to look at this one. So then he'd FOI and say, I want a copy of this particular manual or regulation. And then they would, very begrudgingly, it would take 6 months of back and forth arguing, but they would eventually hand them out. And some of these regulations, there's one here that he got called 20th NORAD Region Regulation Operations 55-7, Unknown Track / Unknown Object Reporting. Now, another one was 20th NORAD Region Operation Instruction, Possible Unknowns and Unknown Object Actions. Another one, which is really interesting, it was called NORAD ADCOM Manual 55-19, Volume 7, Aerospace Reporting System. And I'll discuss that one particularly in a minute. Another one was NORAD Form 61, Unknown Track Report. Another one was NORAD of Operations Form 17, Unknown Track Report. Both those contain sections for UFOs to be filled in by aerospace command and control battle staff. Anyway, so I'll give an example of the NORAD ADCOM Manual 55-19 is particularly interesting because in section 15.4, quite seriously, now remember the United States Air Force and the whole wider Department of Defense said in 1969 and 1970, we're out of the UFO game. We don't even use that word anymore. We do not want it. We're only interested in stray aircraft, meteorites, if they're going to hit America, hostile aircraft, drones, when they'll come in, and so on. However, this 1977 NORAD ADCOM manual on figure 15.4 says subject and purpose, full stop. Then it says this report example provides the NORAD Combat Operations Center with additional data concerning tracks classified as unknown to include unidentified flying objects, UFOs. Now that's really strange because this particular manual is all about unknown track reporting. So when a NORAD control center picks up a weird track, flying through their region, like it might be say the 20th NORAD region at Fort Lee, Virginia, there's a weird plane or missile or whatever flying around in the Atlantic somewhere. The battle controls will watch it. They'll get a good track on it. They'll lock on it. They will estimate its height and altitude. They'll look at weather conditions on another screen and stuff. But when they start filling out the forms really quickly, because this could be a threatening aircraft, it could have come off a Russian aircraft carrier or anything, right? They'll start filling in these forms. Now, like I said, this one particular form, it says to include unidentified flying objects, UFOs. And what's even more interesting is it actually says that this particular form, when it's filled in, it's called figure 15 figure 15 -4. It also says at the bottom that it's a mandatory OPREP 3. That means that once this form is filled in, it needs to be sent using the OPREP 3 system to the NORAD Combat Operations Center, the NORAD Commander-in-Chief, the NORAD Missile Warning Center, the head of some of the MAGCOMs, like head of Pacific Air Forces, North Air Forces, and so on. So not only do we have NORAD manual saying that they've got an unknown track instruction for dealing with unknown radar tracks, but it also is to include UFOs. But this form, once filled out, is sent by a really, really serious OPREP 3 channel, which is used in only really serious situations, like defence significant situations. And OPREP 3 actually, if you were to use the proper word, it actually is classified. The Joint Chiefs of Staff classified as a serious incident / serious event. So that's really interesting. Now, what else can I give you some examples?
Well, and the problem with that is that they, up until, for so long, had been denying they had anything in regards to UFOs in their files, and this is shows that was just not true.
Absolutely. Now, I've got another one. In another NORAD manual called 55, it's a 20th NORAD region manual, 55-8, which is called, I've just got it in front of me, it is actually called Possible Unknown Aircraft Special Tracks Unknown Object Actions. It's actually got on page, Robert Todd asked them to release that particular manual, that particular regulation. And on page 6, in paragraph 2, it says unknown objects, full stop. The following actions will be accomplished for unknown objects. Unknown object reporting will be accomplished using the same procedures for unknown track reporting. NORAD Form 61 will be used even though such observations may not result in track establishment. Entries on NORAD Form 61 will be used where appropriate to standardise the information for review and summary. So that's what that's saying in English is that whether their radar systems establish a good radar track or not, that at least in 1978 thereabouts, at least then, is that UFOs, like unknown objects, will be entered into what they call a Form 61, and I've got a copy of Form 61. It's usual blocks, time, date, location, commanding officer, signature, number of objects, and so on. It's pretty amazing. It's just like a UFO pro form or a UFO form that used to be filled in, in the 50s and 60s. And what it's basically saying, what that paragraph that I just read out is saying, is that even if we don't know anything is up there, we're still going to fill in this form anyway. So that proves to me that at least at base level or command and control level, they were interested in filling out, forms about UFOs. Now, what's really, really odd is now considering that the US Air Force, in their so-called fact sheet, the Condon report, the news press releases, and so on, they've always said UFOs are not a threat to national security, and they are not like there's no evidence that they're anything but natural objects and so on. When Robert Todd found out about these so-called Form 61s, where UFOs were we've got Opera 3 report dealing with UFOs, and then we've got also these Form 61s. So each NORAD command and control centre around the United States had actually two forms that they could fill in for UFOs. The OPREP 3 form I talked about before, and the Form 61 I'm talking about now. Now, Robert Todd asked all the NORAD regions, said, okay, I know full well you've got these Form 61s, and these you can use OPREP 3s as well. He said, I want a copy of all the UFOs, unknown objects, unidentified flying objects, very unusual radar tracks, and so on. He said, I want a copy of every one of them that you've filled out in the last 5 years. So he wrote the 20th NORAD region, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th NORAD regions, and the Alaska NORAD region and NORAD headquarters. And he said, I want actual copies. I want to see actual UFO cases that you filled in, photocopied, and sent to me, and I'll pay you FOI money. Fine. And every single one of them knocked him back. Every single one of the NORAD regions, like Luke Air Force Base, Duluth International Airport, Hancock Airport, whatever, they all said, oh, we're not doing that. No way, we're not giving you our UFO reports. They then passed his letters on to NORAD headquarters, and the Director of Administration there, Terence C. James, Colonel, he said, despite the fact that we've been very good, we've given you stuff in the past, we're not actually releasing these. So that's saying, now I've got all this in writing, that's the extraordinary thing. I could even, if I could find the later on paperwork I've got in front of me, I could actually read out the letter. I'll see if I can find it. Sometimes they were called checklists, like the Form 61 was called a checklist, and the NORAD headquarters and Air Defence Command headquarters eventually said, no, this has been going on too long. Like, we've given you enough information, and we don't want to do it anymore. So, pretty extraordinary stuff, isn't it?
So, and now you've got a lot of this in your website, UFOs Documenting the Evidence blogspot. People can look for that, or, of course, if they look at the posting of this podcast, I'll have a link to it there. So, for instance, in part 4, people can see this form that you're talking about, and the part in the manual. Do you have online those responses to Robert Todd where they said, nope, we're not giving you anything else?
Of course, and absolutely, and that's actually what I'm posting. See, I've got two blogs, a series of blog reports going at the moment. One's called NORAD and the UFO Smokescreen, and the other one's called OPREP 3, a secret UFO reporting system. And both right now, obviously the NORAD blog just deals with nothing but NORAD, but the OPREP 3 blog, just at the moment, I'm dealing with NORAD's involvement in something called the 1975 overflights, which I'll discuss in a minute. But in my next blog, in the OPREP 3 series, I'm going to be presenting the letter that was sent to Robert Todd So I'll present all this letters. I'm presenting all the correspondence that's so contradictory, and can be often contradictory. And what was interesting is that often what NORAD would tell Robert Todd would be completely different than what Aerospace Defence Command, ADCOM, which is just down the hallway, that it would often be completely different. So you'd be in a situation where NORAD's command director, director of administration would tell Robert Todd one thing about NORAD records, and then, both NORAD director of administration and ADCOM director of administration would be talking to Robert Todd about NORAD records, because ADCOM were allowed to talk about NORAD records. But they would give Todd completely different answers. It was really strange. ADCOM tended to be more, what would you call it, more open. In fact, often Robert Todd would write a specific FOI request to NORAD about a specific UFO event, and they wouldn't even answer it. But he'd write to Aerospace Defence Command, ADCOM, and they would actually answer it. So just an example before, very, very early on, those Form 61s I was talking about, there was one NORAD region that actually said, yeah, we will give you copies of our UFO reports that are held on Form 61s and offer it free system printouts. So they actually wrote that to Robert Todd. They actually wrote to him and said that, I'm just finding it here, they actually said to him, a determination has been made that the records requested in your letter of 7th of March 1978 are releasable under the FOI Act, blah, blah, blah. Now, all of a sudden, they had a change of heart. Robert Todd gets a letter. Robert Todd, what he did, he actually appealed the prices. They were going to charge an extraordinary amount of money for just a few UFO reports held on Form 61 checklists. Anyway, eventually he gets a letter from Terence C. James, Colonel, and it says, your letter is 1st of May 1978 concerning an appeal for fee waiver, blah, 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 was forwarded to this headquarters by the 21st Air Defence Region, Hancock Field. After review of the case, a determination has been made that the checklists, so that's Form 61s, even though you had been previously advised that they were releasable, are in fact exempt from mandatory disclosure. Right? So, first 21st region said, yeah, you can have some Form 61s that have been filled out. And then a few months later, the Colonel Terence C. James of headquarters says no, actually we've decided that they're exempt. So that is quite a big turnaround. These examples just go on and on and on. Yep.
I was going to say, often they use these terms, unidentified helicopters, unknown helicopters, and they kind of play down these incidents. Having looked at this and some of these important overflights, I mean, what is your impression? I mean, they've been really dodgy about releasing this information. Why do you feel that is? And do you feel then that these unknowns offer a much bigger mystery than they're letting on?
Yeah, they have to. They must. Because I'll explain what happened. For anyone that doesn't know, in 1975, starting in October, Loring Air Force Base in Maine, for 3 out of 4 nights in a row, the base was overflown by what they called, in actual paperwork, they called them possible helicopters, probable helicopters, unknown objects, and UFOs. So these odd objects stalked Loring Air Force Base, which has nuclear weapons. I think it's got the 42nd Bomb Wing, which was responsible for thermonuclear blasting northern Soviet Union during World War III, if it ever came to that. Now, at the same time, Wordsmith Air Force Base, all the way over in Michigan, they had a really serious UFO encounter. There was definitely one UFO and possibly a second. They were certainly getting radar hits on 2. While a KC-135 tanker was landing at Wordsmith Air Force Base, which also has nuclear bombers, this weird object, it was described a bit like a helicopter but made no sound, It stalked Wordsmith for a full night, and an Operate 3, very serious Operate 3 report was sent to the National Military Command Centre, NORAD, Fort Ritchie Forward Operating Division, various MAGCOMs, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, etc. Now, while this is going on, a few days later, Maelstrom Air Force Base endures 5 nights in a row of UFO, some sort, helicopter, probable helicopter, whatever activity. Now, by the end of November, no less than, we know for a fact that 5 bases, that's Loring, Wordsmith, Maelstrom, Minot Air Force Base in, I think, North Dakota, South Dakota, one of the two, and Falconbridge Air Force Station, actually in Ontario, Canada, were all visited by something. Now, a debunker, an anti-UFO debunker, would say it was a mixture of actual real helicopters, sightseeing helicopters, an FBI helicopter, whatever, plus stars, planets that were just in unfortunate alignments, and so on. The problem is that it just doesn't solve the mystery. It doesn't even come close. In the 70s, the researchers that I've mentioned before started pounding various agencies with FOI requests asking for information about these weird overflights. And all the command posts at each base, plus National Military Command Centre and Air Force Special Investigations, did actually start releasing a lot of material. But when it really, to answer your question, when it really came to the crunch, when the boys, Robert Todd, Barry Greenwood, Todd Zekel, Lawrence Forster, Larry Bryant, etc., when they started hitting, the Joint Chiefs of Staff and National Military Command Centre, Commander-in-Chief of NORAD, Commander-in-Chief of Strategic Air Command, when they started saying, look, you've sent us all the original reports, the telex messages, the Operate 3s, the staff letters, base alerts, and so on, where are the final reports? Where are the final evaluations? Like the final evaluations, like 500-page reports to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to the Secretary of the Air Force, to the Commander-in-Chief of Strategic Air Command, to the Head of Special Projects of FOSI. There was just nothing but reports and localised reports and weather analysis and everything else. There never seemed to be. They were very, very, very coy in releasing any final evaluations. Now, we do know that 2 years after the event, so right into 1977, the Office of Information of the Secretary of the Air Force told Robert Todd in a letter, which I've also got, they said, Robert Todd asked him one blunt question. He said, did the Air Force Intelligence Services investigate these sightings, and if so, what conclusion did they come to? And Colonel Sen came back to him a few weeks later and said, yes, the intelligence services of the United States Air Force investigated these UFO events. No, we have not come to any conclusions. Now, that is extraordinary because, one, if he's telling the truth, it proves beyond a doubt. I mean, if these 75 overflights were weird helicopters and weird phenomenon and light in the sky and things very close to the ground, possibly landing on nuclear at Loring particularly, if these things really were all mundane, if they really were just light in the forest, torches, floodlights, planets, stars, pollution, whatever, then the full resources of the 8th Air Force, 15th Air Force, Strategic Air Command, Alternate Strategic Air Command Headquarters, FOSI, FBI, FAA, Customs even, if we can't figure it out now, that there's, there is no way that the full resources of the United States military could not have made some serious evaluations of what went on. Right? So that's either that is possible. So if it was all just mundane natural stuff, the balloons and helicopters, then the United States Air Force certainly couldn't figure that out. Now, if it was real UFO activity, a week, 2 weeks of pulsing UFO activity over the most sensitive military sites in the United States, some of them anyway, then if they were UFOs, then I'm not surprised that the United States military, the government itself, did not actually present any final evaluations, final analysis, final collations of interviews with colonels, right down to technical sergeants who are actually there. There was no final. Now that tells me that they really did come to the conclusion that these were anomalous objects. You can blame unidentified unknown helicopters, whatever. But there is either way, NORAD and Strategic Air Command and National Military Command are really cornered, because either they really were all natural events, but you would think that they would be falling over themselves to tell the public that these really were actual natural events. Alignments of planets, we can prove that there was a helicopter up there, yada yada yada, whatever. Right? That you would think they would be falling over themselves to tell Congress and so. But they didn't. They could. I mean, General Stratton. Actually, the head of nuclear security matters got involved, and he wrote a letter to Congress, and I think General Blanton, who was in the Air Force, and said, what's going on here? Like, we know this happened. We know we've got the documents that you've been releasing them to all these people in these UFO researchers. Well, I want to know what's happened. And apparently, we've got the documents. I haven't read them properly yet, but they actually went back to General Stratton and said, we actually don't know what it was. We don't know what was. Quite seriously, they did. He actually asked for a congressional, not a congressional hearing, but he asked for a question to be tabled in Congress over it. It's pretty serious. The Canadians were just as spooked. They had no idea what was going on either, and it was all along their border. Now, I'll give you one example of what I mean by it. Now, this is how serious it was. 2 weeks after, 2 weeks after these events started over Maelstrom, Wordsmith, Minor Air Force Base, and so on, the Commander-in-Chief of NORAD sent an urgent telex message to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Commander-in-Chief of Strategic Air Command, and so on. And it says it's a two-page telex, which is quite long. It says at the top, subject, suspicious unknown air activity. Then it says Part 1. Since 28th of October 75, numerous reports of suspicious objects have been received at the NORAD CIC. Reliable military personnel at Loring Air Force Base, Maine, Wordsmith Air Force Base, Nelson, blah, 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 have visually sighted suspicious objects. Objects at Loring and Wordsmith were characterised to be helicopters. Missile site personnel, blah, 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 reported objects. Height finding radars carried objects between 9,500 and 15,000 feet. There was scramblings of F-106s at Maelstrom to actually get to these UFOs, and so on. Now, by the end of this message, Part 5 said, be assured that this command is doing everything possible to identify and provide solid factual information on these sightings. I have also expressed my concern to the Secretary of the Air Force that we come up soonest with a proposed answer to queries from the press to prevent overreaction by the public to reports by the media that may be blown out of proportion. To date, efforts by air-guard helicopters, SAC helicopters, and NORAD F-106s have failed to produce positive identification. Mm-hmm. So you've got a commander-in-chief of NORAD who's really starting to get worried that this is very, very real, and he wants to try and downplay it. Yeah, fascinating stuff.
Well, it's funny, too. He's worried that the media will blow it out of proportion. And what is he worried that they'll blow out of proportion? The fact that some sort of craft right, over the most sensitive, these nuclear bases, they had overflights, and they can't identify what they were. First of all,
you know what's real? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
First of all, if they were really mundane as an astronomical, planets, stars, or something like that, that would be ridiculous, because then all of these people are mistaken, Venus for actual craft for many days. That doesn't make any sense. That would make them look very foolish. If it was actual helicopters, that's extremely shocking, because that means some country out there was able to fly helicopters over on several occasions without any problem, and we would be able to identify that, at least what country did it. And then finally, of course, if it's true they couldn't identify it at all, that would explain, I think, best, the secrecy in that they just don't want to admit they don't know what the heck it was.
Exactly. This is the thing. They're really cornered here because someone now, when all this blew up, the first person to write first people to write a serious appraisal of this whole situation was Barry Greenwood and Lawrence Fawcett in their book Clear Intent, which came out in 1984, because they were the ones that got all the FOI materials out of all these bases. And and even Air Force Weather Services, even the FAA and the FBI investigators. Like the FBI were contacted by Strategic Air Command headquarters to say, look, have you got classified or elusive flights flying over our bases? And the FBI said, no, all our helicopters are all accounted for all the time. You know, like Customs and Border Protection were involved because the helicopters were zipping over the border to Canada and back again. You know, like whatever they were, if it all really was weird helicopters, the problem is that, like you say, I mean, it just proves that these helicopters are operating in sensitive United States Air Force, essentially United States airspace, where, you know, you have to identify yourself. It's called an air identification zone. And this was happening night after night after night after night. And this happened with no bar to their operation. I mean, nothing stopped these things. You know, like Colonel Chapman at Loring Air Force Base honestly was about to order his men to actually shoot one of them down. He said if this goes on any longer, on one particular night, I think it was the 29th of November, he said, just await my order to start shooting. Now, the problem is that at this particular night, the object was actually hovering over nuclear igloos, where nuclear bombs are stored on warm alert for World War III. And so you cannot shoot down, if it was a helicopter, you cannot shoot down a helicopter over, you know, over nuclear weapons dumps. I mean, if it was a radiological accident, you'd have an even bigger mystery to explain to the Secretary of the Air Force. So they pulled the pin on that, and they just said, monitor this thing. Now, one of the actual Air Force telexes that was sent to the other bases, like Loring was experiencing these overflights, so it sent these alerts to all other bases in the region, Griffith Air Force Base, Hancock Field, and Cape Cod, whatever. And it said, one of the telexes said, is that we've got objects hovering over the weapons storage areas that display clear intent. Now, that's an extraordinary word. To actually, for a helicopter or a UFO to deliberately hover right over nuclear storage dumps, and the people watching them actually said this thing's got clear intent. It's not hovering over the grass. It's not hovering wherever it wants to in other spots. It's not, you know, it's specifically hovering for, 10, 20 minutes right over a nuclear weapons igloo. So anyway, the boys in 1984 who wrote the book Clear Intent based the book's title, the title of the book was based on that word, that extraordinary term, in an Air Force Office of Special Investigation telex. So, you know, like, whatever these things were, like I say, if they really were all mundane stuff, you know, the odd sightseeing helicopter that's straight off course plus a whole bunch of planet-through pollution and whatever else, I would have thought that the full resources, the Air Force Weather Central Command, National Military Command Centre J2, Fort Ritchie Fort Operating Division, Ultimate SAC Headquarters, the 8th Air Force, Office of Special Investigations, you know, the INSA areas, which is Editing and Debriefing and Continuity Branch of the Assistant Chief of Intelligence, United States Air Force, and so on. You would think that they would have come up with solutions and been falling over themselves to tell the media and Congress about it, but they didn't. They never could. They never, as the years went on, there was no solution to the mystery. So Boyd was right in it from day one. What's interesting is that Robert Todd, aside from all these other agencies that they FOI'd about these events, Robert Todd started hitting NORAD very, very quickly. And I'll give you one example of a letter they wrote. Wait till you hear this one, right? Now, the boys already had all these documents from Strategic Air Command, and we know that NORAD were CC'd on the distribution list of all these Operate 3s and all these base alerts while the UFOs were over the bases. We know that NORAD knew about them from the second they started. Now, Robert Todd wrote a letter to the Chief of Chief Community Relations Division, Donald B. Stevens, Major Donald B. Stevens, at NORAD headquarters at Peterson Air Force Base, right? And he said, I want copies of all incoming telexes and base alerts, plus logs, you know, command directors' logs and so on, of any unidentified flight activity over SAC bases near the Canadian border. Very simple question. I want, like, he gave dates, like Robert Todd said, I want you to check records from the 28th of October through to the 10th of November, whatever, for any records of unidentified flight activity over 2 strategic air command bases. He limited it to just Wordsmith and Loring. That's fine, right? And anyway, Major Donald Stevens comes back to him and quite seriously writes this. In response to your letter of the 11th of August 1977 asking about unidentified flight activity over SAC bases near the Canadian border, my check of files show that nothing seems to correlate. And then he fobs it off with this, right? On the 31st of October 1975, there were 3 unknowns in the records, all of which were later identified. 2 small planes in Florida and an Air Canada DC-8 in Canada. Quite seriously, that's what he said. So NORAD knew full well what Robert Todd was talking about, but they fobbed him off with sightings down in Florida and stuff. You know, Robert Todd hit the roof. Yeah.
And with Robert Todd, what did he do with all of his information?
Okay, that's the million-dollar question. So Robert Todd was the world's most prolific UFO FOI requester in history. He was the one that got the Holt memo out of Rendlesham Forest fame. He was the one that got the Colonel Betts memo out about Project Moondust. He was the one that, the Ghost of the Estimate, the unusual air incidents over the United States, 1949 document. The United States government released 25,000 pages of records, mostly from the National Archives. Some of it's real low-level stuff, not very interesting. But what he did, Robert Todd was a very private guy. He didn't engage with the UFO community, other than documents researchers like people like me, that of the 70s and 80s, like Barry Greenwood, Lawrence Forster, Todd Beckle, Brad Sparks. Robert Todd would not engage with the UFO community because he thought it was just hadn't gone stupid. Contactees and then alien abductions were just starting to kick in, and ridiculous, outrageous, lurid claims of, UFOs chasing astronauts all over the place. And he just, personally, he didn't want anything to do with it. So he was very, very, how could you explain it? He was quite selective in who he gave his documents to. What he did, the book Clear Intent that Barry Greenwood and Lawrence Forster wrote, Robert Todd supplied them with heaps and heaps of documents, everything he had that was worth, putting in the book. Then the infamous newsletter Just Cause, which had 56 editions, he supplied them. That was editor Brad Sparks, Larry Bryan, Barry Greenwood, and so on. He supplied them with documents as well. But really, for the rest of the UFO community, he wasn't that interested. So what he did was, with all his correspondence, so what he would do, he would send a letter to NORAD. He would have a carbon copy on the back of the typewriter. So he'd keep a lost copy for himself. They'd send a letter back to him, so he could just build up a full chronology of everything he sent and everything they sent back. And he piled these things up in manila folders, like your classic cream manila folders. And it's what happened was, sadly, Robert Todd died about 5 years ago. And when he died, researcher Jan Aldrich went to pick up his boxes of stuff, and it filled an entire car boot, whole car boot, whole back of the car, front seat, the whole lot. So Jan Aldrich drove from Philadelphia to Barry Greenwood's place in Boston, gave Barry Greenwood half of Todd's records, which of course many which Barry'd already seen copies of before, and then Jan kept the other half and took him to his place in, I think, Connecticut. Now, Barry Greenwood right now has all of Robert Todd's records, and slowly, we are talking thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of stuff from NORAD and ADCOM and even the Army, everywhere. So we're slowly getting that scanned now. So Barry Greenwood scans that. He sends PDF copies for me to analyse, deal with, work out what's duplicate, what's junk, work out what's good, and he's even got envelopes and everything scanned in. So Robert Todd's dealings with NORAD were particularly extraordinary because there's no amount of podcast time I could give you to explain how many different answers and fake answers and false answers. Sometimes they'd be really candid with him and they'd give him exactly what he wanted, and sometimes they were shocking, and then everywhere in between. You know what's really crazy? They actually changed. NORAD's headquarters actually changed their own rules because of Robert Todd. Not many people know this, but NORAD headquarters and the NORAD regions got so sick of Robert Todd pelting them with ever more invasive and and aggressive FOI requests, which they, by law, they really have to furnish them with documents. They actually sent out a memo which specifically mentioned him by name. Robert Todd was the director of a very small UFO group called Citizens Against UFO Secrecy. I'm going to read you a memo that went from NORAD headquarters to all the NORAD regions, Alaska region, the 20th, right through to the 26th NORAD region. This is quite seriously what it says. So what they wanted to do, they wanted to stop Robert Todd and his Citizens Against UFO Secrecy UFO group. They wanted to stop him from FOI requests. They couldn't legally do it, but what they could do is make sure that he paid an absolute fortune for nothing. And this is quite seriously what the memo says. It's signed by Colonel James H. Ricks, who is still alive today. I actually spoke to him the other day on email. But anyway, this is what it says. Interim message change, blah, blah, blah. Okay, tells us to automatically waive a search and duplication cost for single FOI act requests if those costs are less than $30. This change also permits FOI managers to set aside the automatic waiver fee, blah, blah, blah. Okay, how's this? It's amazing that Robert Todd and Citizens Against UFO Secrecy actually getting mentioned in high-level NORAD memoranda, but this is what it says. Because of cumulative and recurring FOI Act requests, we will no longer waive FOI search fees and duplication fees, even though they may total less than $30 for Mr. Robert Todd, 2528 Belmont Avenue, Ardmore, Pennsylvania, and his Citizens Against UFO Secrecy. Mm-hmm. Further, we believe that it is in the public interest to have Mr. Todd and his cause group pay for all record searches, even though no responsive records are found. So in other words, they're saying that we know that Mr. Todd and his little group are going to keep pelting us with vicious FOI requests. We've had a gutful of it. We know we're releasing too much stuff. The Congress is starting to raise their eyebrows. It's getting into magazines now. It's going to get on TV soon if we keep helping this guy along. Even though there's other times where they've been incredibly unhelpful, they've blatantly lied in some of their correspondence with him. Now, they basically say every single FOI request that Robert Todd sends in, well, even if you know that there's something there, fine, just charge him as much as you can anyway. That's what it's basically saying. And interestingly, now Robert Todd didn't know about this because this was an internal NORAD memorandum. So he found after this memo was sent around, I've actually seen the correspondence, like his letters, his writing to his friends, saying, I can't understand this. NORAD's just charging me massive amounts of money for nothing. And then he said, he wrote to NORAD, and he said, why are you guys doing this? We've always, you've never done this before. And then they said, look, we'll be honest with you, we've changed the rules. They actually wrote that. They said, we've changed the rules.
What's really shocking about all of this is, and almost sad, and what I really appreciate with what you're doing and why, we've taken it on to re-review all of this stuff and to put it together, is that the UFO field has been wasting its time. I mean, Robert Todd and some of these others have really been breaking down very meticulously, putting the pieces together, not assuming, but with these documentation able to demonstrate the Air Force is lying. Decades ago, they were able to prove this. That NORAD is lying about when it comes to the UFO topic. And here's most of the UFO crowd for all of this time running around chasing these theories and mythologies with MJ-12 and all this other junk. And right under their nose is this really rich information.
Yeah, it's terrible. It is absolutely shocking. Like, it is really, really, really bad because these guys and people like me now have done enormous amounts of very, very hard work, right? And nobody, very few people know. It's only when they pick up obscure books that they actually know anything about it. And it's really, really sad because the amount of money and time that's getting wasted on ridiculous junk and endeavours that never ever go anywhere. Ads in newspapers that cost, $50,000 for alien abduction, people to come forward and tell their story. That happened in 1994. Bigelow spending unknown amounts of money for databases which were already, previously available. Blah blah blah. Like there is no limits. People spending hours and hours and hours outrageously talking garbage on Facebook, having arguments, and all this time could be spent. I'll give you an example of how serious this is. Right, NORAD, 23rd NORAD region, extract. This Robert Todd hit the 23rd NORAD and 23rd Aerospace Defense Command headquarters at Duluth Air Force Base in, I think, Minnesota in about 1978, and he said he wanted from the 1975 overflight. He basically said, I want copies of your operations senior director's logbook, any entries or excerpts or log listings about UFOs for November and October 1975. And they actually did come back to him. How's this? Now, like you were saying, everyone else is running around doing stuff, and yet these people are wasting their own money trying to get these extraordinary records out. This is what the 23rd NORAD region's senior director actually had on file. I'll read this to you. Right? Okay. Received unusual sighting report. So this is 12:05 midnight, 11th November.
Mm-hmm.
Received unusual sighting report from Falconbridge Air Force Station, Ontario, Canada. Info passed to the NORAD Command Director, Intelligence and Weather. Right? So if they're not interested in UFOs or unusual sightings, you've got here received unusual sighting report from Falconbridge. Info passed to NORAD Command Director. That's pretty high. Intelligence, that's probably NORAD Intelligence, and Weather, that would be NORAD Weather Services. Right, so only a few hours later, hear this, actions pertaining to the scramble of JL08 and 09, their fighter jets, due to unusual object sighting. With Director of Operations of Approval, 22nd Region, scrambled JL08 and JL09 at 17:45 Zulu, and they were airborne at 17:50. NORAD Combat Operations Centre notified Falconbridge Air Force Station, blah, blah, blah. 22nd aircraft over Falconbridge flying over incident point, no sighting, blah, blah, blah. So here's confirmation of the 22nd NORAD region, and it was actually the New York. I think it was the New York Air National Guard actually sent in fighter aircraft from Falconbridge Air Force Base to Canada to chase UFOs. Now, this is all on the record. It's just written dryly here like it's normal, right? Mm-hmm. A day later, trying to find another good one. A day later, transmitted unknown report to NORAD Combat Operations Centre surveillance area on another incident at Falconbridge Air Force Station. What else have we got here? Here's one. UFO report, so in a couple of days again, 15th of November, UFO report from Falconbridge, occurrence time 02:02 Zulu. Report sent to NORAD Combat Operations Centre surveillance, referred to the Assistant Command Director, Intelligence, and the Space Defence Centre. What the? The Space Defence Centre?
Right.
So NORAD at the Cheyenne Mountain Complex has a missile warning centre and the Space Defence Warning Centre, or the Space Defence Centre. The Space Defence Centre runs something called the SPADITS program, which is the Space Tracking and Detection program. For some reason, the 23rd NORAD region is referring a UFO report from Falconbridge, Canada, to NORAD surveillance, plus the Assistant Command Director of NORAD, plus intelligence at NORAD, and finally the Space Defence Centre. Now, except for a meteorite, why would you be sending a UFO report from another country than Canada to the Space Defence Centre at Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado? Like, this is really serious. This is really, really crazy stuff. I just cannot see. I mean, you just go, I've got pages of these logs, and at the end of every one, unknown object report, blah, 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 blah. Looked like white flashing lights, went for about 2 hours, was not aircraft, made a strange turn. And it says at the end, referred to NORAD Combat Operations Centre. There's just pages of these, and nobody knows that. It's really sad. I mean, another piece of paper I was talking before about Form 61s, which are used to fill out UFO reports at NORAD regional centres. Well, there's another type of form called a DO5, and it And I've got an example of a DO7. I've got an example of a DO7 from the 26th NORAD region of Luke Air Force Base in, I think, Arizona, near Phoenix, maybe.
Yeah,
And
it's right here. Yep.
No, well, from Luke Air Force Base, headquarters, 26th NORAD region. This is a report to be filled when anyone. Now, remember, the US government doesn't take UFO reports from civilians after 1969. That's what they say. Yet here, we've got a 26th NORAD region form, a one-page form. It's actually promulgated on the 27th of October 1977, and it actually says unidentified flying object report. So the person taking the call at the NORAD 26 headquarters has to fill out caller's identity, name, address, phone number, caller's location, object description, shape, size, object characteristic, noise, light, height, weather, time of duration, blah, 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 blah. So this is for an organisation that is by the very order of the Secretary of Defence and the Secretary of the Air Force back only not that many years before was not to be dealing with the UFO problem, especially from civilians. Right, here they are. They're able to take calls and fill out pro formas that go onto pages, and we're expected to. I mean, no wonder people are suspicious. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh, exactly. So, and that's the problem, and that you could see here, and I think that, you know, the people weren't as open to this, but I think they are more now, is that, you know, it's just lies after lies after lies and years of lying. So it's hard not to be really suspicious about, you know, what it is you're lying about and why are you lying? And
exactly. In my last blog at the end, I think I wrote, what are we expected to think? When we see all these documents, these contradictory documents, these constant use of the word unusual sightings, unusual object report, UFOs, the constant use of those words, every single page has those words used again and again and again and again, outrageously used constantly. And yet the very same people that are using them are writing back to researchers like Robert Todd and Armin Victorian, and even people like me, saying we do not handle the UFO matter. That is somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like, it's just laughable. It's just.
And
Yeah.
I guess getting back, it's just frustrating. One thing, it's, you know, and now this thing, the topic is you know, ridiculed for the most part, especially in the 90s or earlier on. You know, the media really made fun of it. They seem to be warming up a bit, but if researchers had been more rigorous and let the government, through their own records, tell the story, because they do tell the story in a shocking and startling way, and in the most important way, if we would have stuck to that, then it would have been, I think, much more effective. But you know, it's not just, okay, some people may say, well, there's some disinformation, and that could be little grains of information put out there, but you don't even need that, because people in this field, unfortunately, love to speculate and run with their speculation, and then go to conferences and espouse their speculation, creating these whole belief systems that have, you know, that are largely, unfortunately, fantasy, or at least if they're not fantasy, they're not substantiated. Not like these documents substantiate all of these incidents, and that's the mess we've gotten ourselves into. But
it's so bad that I don't even I can't believe how. I mean, people like most people have to simply assume like that you've got all this great evidence in front of you, some, you know, great data, great documents, great, you know, interviews with people who are actually there, and most UFO so-called researchers and enthusiasts and UFO buffs just want to take it so much further. They will not let it just sit where the evidence sits. I mean, like I say to people, if you could actually go to court, if this actually got a day in court, the Supreme Court in DC, and you said to the judge, look, unidentified objects, definitely unidentifiable objects, UFOs, stalking American military bases, and NORAD knows everything, you know, a lot more about what they've said. He would look at the evidence and he would say, wow, I'm going to hear this case. But if you went to him and said, aliens, space brothers, interdimensional beings, and reptilians are stalking, you know, at the American countryside and military bases, and NORAD know all about it, the judge would say, I'm not hearing this. there's not enough evidence for it. He'd say, oh, well, I'm not going to waste the court's time on this.
Right.
But it has to be that you have to go with what the information is the information given in these witness reports and in in these various staff telexes and memos, and it's the CIA as well. The CIA produce piles of discussion papers, point papers, interest pieces, like information updates, draft memoranda, and so on. But that was all pointed to, yes, we are very aware of the UFO phenomenon. We don't really know what it is. It is something that bothers the Air Force. It bothers us. But you never see anything about aliens, or you never see anything about tapping every phone in the UFO community or everything like that. I mean, I've had the amount of times people ask me and say, well, people will just blatantly say, oh, so your phone must be tapped, right? And I go, no, I highly doubt it. No. Or people say, so does your mail ever get intercepted? And I say, no. The level of conspiracy, there is definitely cover-up. There's absolutely, without a doubt, there has been lies and cover-up. But for people to assume that it's a multi-government, multi-generational, multi-billion-dollar cover-up, spanning, dozens of countries, crashed sources, definitely with beings on board and stuff like that, it's just taking the information, the evidence too far. It becomes laughable. It becomes laughable to the government. It becomes laughable to law enforcement. It becomes laughable to judges and lawyers. It becomes laughable to pilots' unions, air traffic control unions, organisations dealing with aerospace, colleges, university departments, embassies. So yeah, like you say, I mean, we had this great information. We had this great robust sharing of information in the 70s in newsletters like Just Cause, and whole swathes of the UFO community have completely dropped it and said, this is miles too boring, it's way too technical, and aliens are already here and they probably live under the White House. It's just crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
What can you do? But we have ran long because there's just so much information. But we'll definitely be catching up with you again in the future. But thank you so much for coming on again and sharing with us. I know it's funny, the connections to Australia always seem to be difficult, but it's great that we were able to do this, and we'll definitely point people to the abundance of information that you have on your blog.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've got heaps. It's not just about NORAD and Operate 3s and 75
right.
I've got polls, Vietnam War, usage of the word UFO after the end of, the Blue Book should have closed down, and UFO reports never made it to Blue Book, the closing of the service system, Australian radar networks, and what we call contacts of interest that appear on radar screens. I've got piles and piles of stuff. There's a lot more coming out.
Yep. All right. Well, great. Thank you so much.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Thank you again to Paul Dean for coming on the show. It's always great to hear from him. I mean, what high energy he has, but it's really important what he's doing. And it is funny that a guy from Australia, has to be the one who is really delving into these American files. And maybe American ufologists should be embarrassed by that. No, actually, there are a lot of American ufologists, like, Richard Thiem and the guys who worked on that Government and UFOs book, who are doing this sort of work, and it's really important stuff, too. And in fact, coupling that book, UFOs and Government, that Richard Thiem and Robert Powell and I think Mike Swords and a lot of other people worked on, is important, because then you can use this information, for instance, to go look back at those files and find, like, the OP3 reports. Which one of those did they use OP3 to escalate? And it demonstrates then that those files were not just a normal UFO report, that they were UFO reports that were taken very, very seriously and were shuttled to the upper echelons of the military in a very quick manner, because they were so important to them. So very important stuff. I can't thank Paul Dean enough for what he is doing and for sharing this information with us. I think that, when we look at the year in review, he's one of the highlights. He's one of his work is a highlight to me of some of the stuff going on in this field. So, and I shared that opinion last night on Coast to Coast AM with George Knapp, and George seemed to be interested in Paul Dean's work, as well he should, because Paul Dean's doing great stuff. So hats off to Paul Dean, and I'm sure next year in 2017 we will be talking even more about Paul Dean, about his work and what he's finding, because it's important. Now we have, essentially the Air Force, NORAD, and others caught up in these lies that for some reason their public statements are, we do not investigate UFOs, or at least we haven't since 1969, and we know that just to be false. Their own records say we investigated, have UFO investigations. And so their own files are telling a different story than they're telling the public. Why? And there's no wonder people are going to have conspiracy theories when they're being lied to. They're going to come up with, well, this must be the reason, or that must be the reason. What the real reason is, who knows? Maybe Tom DeLonge knows. Somebody knows. But whether we'll know is another question. So we'll continue at Open Minds to follow the stories, and if we begin to figure that out, that would be wonderful, and we'll let you know, of course, on this show and on the website at openmindstv.tv and at the UFO Congress, of course. So if you haven't gotten your tickets, get those. We did send out mailers. If you're not on our mailing list, you can email us and get on the mailing list. You could also get on our email mailing list in the upper right-hand corner of openminds.tv, or on the right-hand side, essentially. There's a box that you could subscribe. Also, if you go to ufocongress.com and scroll down, there's a really big box there where you can get on the mailing list. And we do those together, updates for the Congress and openminds.tv together. And you get to see all of the great content that we release on a regular basis. So, I'm proud of the information we've been able to get out there. I think it's really good, important stuff, and I hope you do too. And on that note, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Thank you to all of the people who have been on the show this past year. I think we've had some wonderful discussions. I'm very excited about future discussions that we'll have on this podcast. And so it's going to be another great year next year, I think. Of course, I'm very excited about the UFO Congress. I think we're going to have an amazing event with just some really cool people, people we've talked to on this show. You could go to ufocongress.com and look up who these people are and what they do. And if you're a listener of the show and you appreciate the show, I think you're definitely going to appreciate the people that we'll have at the Congress. And if for some reason you can't make it, which would be unfortunate because I would love to see you there, but if you can't make it, over the next few months after the conference, we will be posting those lectures on the video portal, the Open Minds UFO video portal, for just a few dollars a month. You can have access to that, and you get access to years and years and dozens of lectures and videos from some of your favorite researchers and people we've talked to. So that's a great deal, I think. It really helps us out because that's one of the few things we charge for. We don't really charge for much. So check that out. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you to Caleb Hanks for the opening and the close music. We're hoping that Caleb and his brother Micah will be at the conference as well. Micah's supposed to be manning a table to sell his books. They're also great guys, great researchers, and hopefully we can have Micah do another lecture at the 2018 UFO Congress coming up here. But thank you to Caleb Hanks for his awesome music. I love his music. If you go to the Open Mind UFO Radio website, you'll find a link to more of his music. And then, of course, thank you to Martin Willis for doing the news with us at the top of the show. And thank you all so much for